would you plan the biggest bank robbery in the world? Ever heard of the Brazilian method? Well, it was a day like every other day in 2017 when a group of 20 daredevil criminals decided to pull off the biggest bank heist the world has ever seen, using the Brazilian method. And the shocking story of how that turned out is what we're about to delve into in this video. Now, I know you're wondering what the Brazilian method is. Well, you see, for decades, South American drug rings and criminal gangs have relied on one method to stealthily carry out their activities. That method? Underground tunnels. While this method has been used for smuggling anything illegal, from firearms to drugs and humans in other parts of Latin America, the craft has been perfected by the Brazilian crime syndicates for one major purpose: big bank heist. And these banks are not your everyday commercial banks. We're talking about big-time banks, like the state-owned Banco de Brazil, with millions of reals in their vaults. In October 2017, a group of robbers put together a lot of money, planning, and man-hours, and were on the verge of coordinating a heist in such a magnitude that the world has not seen. Join me on this journey, filled with intrigue and suspense, as we explore the story of the biggest bank heist the world would ever witness. It was October 2017, and the Sao Paulo police had been on the tail of a criminal gang for over 3 months. They decided it was time to swoop in. All along, the team had rented a building next to where the criminal gang had been holed up for 4 months prior. And while there, the police placed the gang on 24-hour surveillance, unknown to the gang. At long last, D-Day arrived, and the Sao Paulo police swooped in, nabbing 16 out of suspected 20 members of the gang. Now, the hideout was like every other building surrounding it, and to the unsuspecting, nothing would seem amiss. Just like every other home, the criminals' hideout was modestly furnished, filled with food and water. However, it also contained special clothing and digging tools. Actually, it was the abundance of digging tools that first tipped the officers off, and as they probed further into the house, they stumbled into one of the rooms, and it was at that point the pieces started to fit. In their search, the police uncovered something totally unexpected: a 600-meter tunnel leading directly to the vault of a nearby bank. How did this tunnel come to be? What was its purpose? How did they manage to pull off such a feat without attracting attention? Well, it all began 4 months prior to the raid, when a seemingly innocent 35-year-old woman rented out a house in Sao Paulo under a false identity. At the same time that this was happening, somewhere in the rundown northern part of the city, yet another person was also renting out a house. And so, with 2 houses rented, the time had come for the plan to advance to the next stage. First, the house downtown was torn down and rebuilt into a temporary underworld headquarters. And then the other apartment, which was strategically located close to the Bank of Brazil, was transformed into an operational center. That done, you know how they say that you have to spend money to make more money? Well, turns out the rule also applies in the criminal underworld. Doing the costing, the team came to the realization it would cost $1.2 million to carry out their heist. So they split the cost among the members, and each one pulled their weight. With the money and location locked in, it was time to get to work, building a 600-meter tunnel. But wait a minute, how do you build a 600-meter tunnel in the middle of the town without drawing attention? This is where 3 members of the gang came in. I mean, who better to turn to than 3 criminal masterminds who have 2 separate successful prison breaks using tunnels under their belt, right? Well, with these 3 in charge, the work was cut out for the team. By the experts' calculation, for the team to build the tunnel, they would have to work at night to avoid scrutiny. And these nocturnal outings would be in shifts from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., taking breaks on weekends. The work thus determined, the team embarked on the digging, doing it all by hand and loading the soil into sacks. While for an average person disposing of the soil would be a tall order, the masterminds of the tunnel were well prepared for this hurdle. In what seems to be a brilliant move, the gang made sure that the path led to an underground stormwater drain. So rather than move the soil to the surface, they disposed of it in the drain. thereby expertly avoiding any suspicion. Or so it seemed. Because they were discreetly digging the tunnel and disposing of the dirt, the Brazilian police had received their first anonymous tip. In response to that, they increased surveillance on the group. And even though little was known about the tunnel at this point, longer periods of surveillance would lead the police to the gang's hideout in the rundown north of the city. Unfortunately for the police, but fortunately for the gang, the lead the police got turned out to be a dead end. This gave the gang more time to keep working on the tunnel, with the police now temporarily off their backs. Speaking of the tunnel, let's talk about it for a bit. The dimensions of the tunnel were quite impressive, a testimony to the skill of the masterminds. The tunnel was about 1.5 meters high and reinforced with iron beams and wood. It was even wired with lights and ventilation, with the walls also lined with plastic garbage bags to reduce dust which might attract attention. At about the 3rd month into digging, the police returned on the gang's tail. However, this time they were wiser, so they applied tact and stealth. First, they rented a nearby house and set up as friendly neighbors, all the while monitoring communication and movement around the building. But even at that, it wasn't until the gang was 3 months into building the tunnel that the police caught on. Immediately, it became clear to them that something big was about to go down. And if the police still needed more proof, they would also stumble on the fact that the gang acquired 7 bulletproof cars in preparation for the heist. All of these leads now on the police's radar, the detectives were on red alert. They knew they were dealing with an extremely dangerous and organized gang with a long history of violent crimes, including homicide. These criminals were not your average Brazilian criminals. They had age and experience on their side, and they were very dangerous. In fact, a careful look at their ages reveals that most of them were above 35, well above the age of your average Brazilian criminal. Meanwhile, the gang had already gotten to the vault of the Sao Paulo branch of the Bank of Brazil. And with those bulletproof cars and everything ready, internal communication showed they were going to strike by the weekend. What was the target? Well, it was still unknown at this point until the police swooped in a day before the planned heist. After the arrest, it became clear they were going for $303 million stored in the vault. Had they been successful, it would have gone down in history as the biggest bank heist the world has ever seen. To put things in context, the biggest bank heist in history up to that point was the $268 million heist in a Baghdad bank in 2017. So these guys were going hard here. Anyway, with the criminals now in the police net, they were faced with a question. Who were they? And what do we know about them? Well, as investigations progressed, it was discovered that one Alçu Nogueira was the ringleader of the gang. Interestingly, as it turns out, his criminal endeavors extended far beyond the confines of Brazil, all the way to Paraguay. Law enforcement officials discovered that the alleged gang leader was involved in orchestrating a daring cash storage vault heist near the Brazilian border earlier that year. In that brazen operation, thieves unleashed grenades, explosives, and assault rifles to secure their illicit gains, which amounted to a staggering $13 million. Tragically, one brave police officer lost his life. Police investigations would also reveal yet another accomplice to the heist, an established enemy of the state, the PCC. The PCC, known as the First Command of the Capital, is a powerful Brazilian-based drug trafficking gang, and with the heist demanding substantial financial input, it is widely believed that the PCC played a pivotal role in financing the ill-fated endeavor. And it wasn't their first rodeo either. The notoriety of the PCC extends far beyond their involvement in this heist. Born within the confines of Sao Paulo's deplorable prison system in the 1990s, the PCC has grown since to become Brazil's most influential organized crime group, boasting an estimated membership of 22,000 individuals, according to local sources. The PCC stands as a formidable force within Brazil's criminal landscape, representing a dark underbelly that has plagued the nation for years. Their intricate web of drug trafficking, violence, and organized crime has cast a shadow over Brazil as a nation. Thanks for watching again. If you like stories like these, make sure you click the subscribe button before it disappears. See you in the next one.